Yeah. Yeah. What? Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Loaded.
Yeah. What? Yeah. 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 What? Yeah. 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 What? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is still with us, but in a different capacity tonight. And so you get to hear his wonderful voice, and be part of this discussion as we engage on how SMEs can really begin thinking about weaving their brand in amazing stories and really just growing beyond themselves in that way. And so for those of you that have been following us over the last couple days on social media, we've taken a really interesting approach to how we, I guess, build up some intrigue and interest for this event. The team was really like sort of we're going back and forth on how we wanted to take this, and the Nudge team did a really good job, driven by Mari, big up Mari, on how we sort of promote this and really tell the story about how this is to come together. And if you've been following on social media, you'd see a story that we've been telling about the soap maker. And it really tells the story of how SMEs can and should begin thinking about their business, leveraging both storytelling as well as technology into one sort of approach to get a really amazing outcome. And so without further ado, let me tell you that story. Let me get in my full storytelling mode. All right, guys, it's the evening, so we're taking a little drink, to start it off, All right, chilling. So, clear throat. There was once a soap maker who worked very hard, developing soaps that were local and loved. Like many, she panicked when the pandemic came around. She deepened solely on markets which were no longer around. She heard of this idea of an online shop, but knew not what it took nor how to set it up. To bed she went, flustered and spent. Something had to be done. She had to pay her rent. After morning run, which relieved all her stress, she couldn't believe it when she sat down at her desk. To her great wonder, her inbox was full of hundreds of orders she had to fulfill. She traced them back to the most beautiful site, featuring all of her soaps, photographed and priced. Confused as she was, she shipped all the orders, thinking she'd stay up that night to see what the cause was. Hidden behind sheer curtains, she saw her computer light up, and the little developer elves appeared on her screen of her shop. Away they went coding, adding more of her soaps with "Shop local this Christmas" carousel posts. Amazed and bewildered, grateful and blessed, these elves saved her Christmas from becoming a mess. If you are like our soap maker, needing a helping hand in tech, count on Nudge and the TBR to walk you through those steps. All right. And so through this story, we tell a beautiful sort of fun way of doing it, following something that's familiar. This sort of poem, and speaking about something that's familiar to us, talking about Santa and the elves and that sort of thing, to really tell the fact that if we're able to leverage technology in a really meaningful way, it can have a really powerful effect for us, And so many businesses during the pandemic have experienced this. They've experienced that their shops are closed, they don't know how to get to their customer, and they're really not sure what to do. And so what has really blossomed over the last 2 years now, it's crazy to be thinking that we're almost on 2-year mark, is that a lot of platforms have come through and to really begin solving this problem. And Nudge is doing an amazing job at building a community around this platform type approach to help people who produce products to really get their products out to market and to serve customers in this new way that they've been traditionally working through a brick and mortar type approach. And so with that start to storytelling, we're gonna segue into a conversation on just that. How do we begin leveraging stories in that way to begin having that sort of emotional, powerful impact so that people begin to feel these stories, represent them in some way, identify with these brands, and fall in love ultimately, because that's what we want. We want people to not just buy our products, but to fall in love with our products or service, because that sort of run-on word of mouth effect is something that's truly amazing that we all aspire for and want for our brands. And so I'm sure you all have heard enough of me. So without further ado, I will give way to my wonderful panelists to begin sharing some of their insights. And so I'll do it, well, look at that, all of them here. So from top, Scott, Nakia, and Andre. And I'll allow them to introduce themselves in that order.
Everybody. So Kyle, it's really great to reverse roles. I'm happy that you're playing host this time around. So I'm Scott Hilton Clark. I had the privilege of working with leaders and executives and entrepreneurs from different parts of the world as an executive coach for the past 25 years. And I'm also founder of a program called Empath that helps people find their music, in essence, what really makes them great. And I love my job, and I almost think of each of my clients as their own Netflix series. And I'm looking forward to this panel discussion because I think of myself more as a story listener than a storyteller. And I look forward to seeing where we go in this conversation. Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are listening to us and watching us. My name is Nikia Riviak, and currently you find me in Brooklyn, New York, but I am a woman of Caribbean ancestry, if you can hear the accent, originally from Trinidad and Tobago, proud Trini. And I'm really excited to be here, one, to support Nudge and Tech Beach and my good friend Kyle and Anya, and also to meet these they're very handsome gentlemen, but they're also very smart. That's why they're here. But anyway, besides that, I think what's important to you, I'm sure, is what I do right now, but I'll tell you a little bit very briefly about what I have done and the role that storytelling has played in that journey. So I'm right now director of consumer insights at Netflix, where my job spans all parts of the organization. And it's everything from brand and reputation that Netflix has across markets to a space called creative production, where the team is thinking about how you leverage an asset anywhere from a static image or box art on the screen all the way through to the actual movie or series. How do you leverage storytelling and truncate it when all you have is a static image? So that's like a question that we think about to teams that are at the intersection of content and product. And it's been an exciting several weeks in Netflix, because not only is it the caliber of talent really high, but I think storytelling is in their bones. The final thing that I'd say is that before Netflix, I traversed a career in research and insights, lived in several countries, but did so with storytelling at the heart of what I did. Because what few people know is that I used to be a professional dancer, and I think I'm obsessed with moving people. And I used to do that through movement. And I think so much of what we do in business is moving people to think differently about our brands, to value the service or the product that we're offering in a way that sort of fits into their lives, and to appeal to that, you need to be able to convince and compel. And oftentimes, the more that you can connect to emotion, like Kyle did when he just shared that story, the more you're able to sort of win over hearts and minds. So it's been a joyous journey in transforming a function that's often known to be perhaps very data-driven to make it much more emotive. And it's great to do it at a company like Netflix, where literally they rely on insights about members and like what they're experiencing and the stories that people want to see, whether that be in automotive or in, dating and love life. And they do so quite effectively. So it's been wonderful to sort of be there, leveraging the power of insights about people, culture, humanity, so that they can recruit better stories and creators, and then tell better stories on platforms. So I'm happy to be here, and I'll toss it over to Andre.
All right. Hi. So I'm Andre. And when I think about my career, it was actually a story that got me started as a professional coach, trainer, and public speaker about 15 years ago. I was in Jamaica, and I met someone on vacation, and he asked me what do I do? And at that point, I was head of marketing for Jamaica Money Market Brokers in Jamaica. And he said, "No, I didn't ask you what your job was. What do you do? Who are you? What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I just finished a negotiation course about teaching negotiation in the organization. And I think I want to write a book about it." And he said, okay, that sounds good. He said, now ask me what I do. So I said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I run a travel agency. I do tours to Israel, mostly group tours out of Connecticut. But he said, ask me what I want to do. And I said, I don't know what you want to do. He says, well, I want to publish a book, right? So he challenged me to spend the next 9 months writing a book. And I originally expected to write a textbook on negotiation skills. Ended up writing a business novel, a medieval tale about two kingdoms at war with each other, and try to embed the learning of negotiation into this story, where king calls his two sons and says, we're going to be invaded by another kingdom. One son was a soldier, one son was a farmer, and he sends the farmer son out on a mission to try and save the kingdom, when the farmer thought he absolutely wasn't the right son to go on that mission. And it's how you go through the lessons of that story that sort of embed the learnings in negotiation skills. So that ended up in a career over the last about 15 years of me doing corporate training, especially on negotiation skills. And I can tell you that whenever I was in a 2-day workshop, which is a long time now that we've been in lockdown, I can't imagine being a 2-day workshop anymore. But whenever I was in a 2-day workshop, after lunch on day 2, as sleepy as everybody ever looked in that room, if ever I said, I want to tell you about a time, everybody would pay attention. Because those little anecdotes that you tell that really help you to share a story are more powerful than any theory or facts that you can ever put forward. And after about 7 years, I found that I had dated stories. I was telling the same story over and over. And I got bored with my stories. I can't imagine how certain like old rock groups play the same song on tour over and over for 20 years, right? So having said that, I needed new stories. Being a full-time coach and trainer, I ran out of stories after about 7 years. And I decided I would find a job with what I consider to be a global leader in storytelling, corporate storytelling, which was Virgin Atlantic. And my mission was to join Virgin Atlantic, really to understand how a company who spends very little on advertising gets such a powerful brand presence. And a question I used to ask people, when talking about Virgin versus, let's say, British Airways, how many planes do you think Virgin Atlantic has, right? And people would guess like 100, 200, 300, because British Airways is up close to 1,000. And I would often tell them, no, we have less than 40 planes, right? We just have like a little over 30-something planes at the time. And it's sort of strange that when you think about Virgin Atlantic, you think about this massive global airline, but they have fewer planes than Caribbean Airlines, right? So how did they get that out there? And I think it was just really learning what I could from the organization about telling a story to build your brand. I meant to go there for 2 years to learn a little storytelling. I ended up being there for 5, and then I ended up being there for 8. And now I'm back, having left Virgin, back full-time, running my own consultancy again. Very, very focused on innovation and storytelling, and how do you use storytelling as a corporate communication tool. So excited to be on this panel, and I hope I could add something interesting to the conversation today.
All right. So it sounds like each one of you come from a different perspective on understanding how to leverage storytelling to really build powerful brands. I think Scott even understood himself, right? From the perspective of like, Scott specializes in people telling their own personal stories, finding, as he so happily put it, finding their music, right? And so from the perspective of people telling their own personal stories, which is then translated through their brand. And so just connecting Andre's last point, a big part of why Virgin is so powerful is because the founder of Virgin tells his story through the brand, Sir Richard Branson, And so when people travel with Virgin, they get to or interact with Virgin products, they get to feel like a touch of his like adventure type personality, because when I interact with a Virgin brand, I feel like I'm an adventurer myself, and so it's because Sir Richard Branson did so well to find his music and translate his music through his brand, that when people now interact with their brand, they feel like they are adventurers too. you know? And that's why people travel with Virgin, because they want to feel like that adventurer, like Sir Richard Branson, you know? And so in essence there, that is an example of a powerful story told, you know, where oh my gosh, yeah. And so Scott, I mean, yeah, like I said, you undersold yourself a little bit by not letting us know that you help people find their music and tell their story, you know? You're on mute, you're on mute. The most popular thing said on the internet today.
These days, yeah, for sure. No, I think there's something very powerful. And I love, you know, where Nakia talked about where people get moved, right? And a lot of what I help my clients do is to tell their own story powerfully. And what happens is you see a whole rise in confidence that happens from that, right? When you can really tell your story authentically, right? And we hear that word authentically a lot these days, because what we've been talking about in common, this idea of heart. I mean, heart is present. You know, there's a saying around, people remember 20% of what they hear, but they remember 80% of what they feel. And really getting into that deeply, you know. And I'll just share just a really simple idea. I had a client who, senior executive CEO, and she said to me, you know, one of the things that worries her is that she said she really doesn't make a good first impression, right? And when we looked at it together, we said, well, you know, there's some truth to that, right? Because her real strength really is she gets in an organization and she's one of those people like that will just through grit get things done, right? But her first impression was really not at an executive level with executive presence. And what we decided to do is I said to her, you know, what you need to do is when you meet somebody, declare the truth and say, you know what, I don't make a good first impression. And by her declaring that authentically, all of a sudden, she made a good first impression, right? So there's something about owning the truth and owning your story that's extremely powerful. And yeah, I help people find their music, and in finding their music, there's an element of doing their story. I guess the last thing I will add to is, and we talked about the fact that we do a lot of work as consultants in communication, and how I got over my particular fear of public speaking was adopting storytelling, right? And there's a place where I felt, well, as a West Indian, I could tell a story, right? We're telling stories. So a lot of my clients, I encourage them to kind of take on that approach. And you see a lot of the fears you think about kind of dissipate as we do that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. So I wanna channel the discussion tonight. We're here for another 40 minutes or so. Everybody, you know, is a big boy lime. Bring out your wine glasses. Andre having a mojito, you know. So, you know, it's a cheers to the lime that we can't have in person, but we're virtual, right? All right, cool. So everybody can lime with us, you know. We are chilling at a nice little lounge, four of us talking about storytelling. And I want us first to go in an angle of thinking about some of our favorite brands and what stories really resonated with us that caught us, and now we're hooked on the brand, or might not even be hooked on the brand, but we're hooked on the story that the brand is telling, you know? So some of us may have this brand that we love because we're woven into the story, or like me, I don't actually wear Crocs, but I love the Crocs story. You know, I think it's powerful and amazing, right? And how they're able to build a phenomenal brand because of it. And so come reminisce with me, share with me some campaigns, some stories, some brands that really connected with you. We could start with Nakia.
So I'm going to date myself, and I'm going to use this purposefully to tell the story, but I loved the old TTT. like the old TTT before there was this is Trinidad and Tobago television for those of us who are joining who are not from Trinidad. And of course, now I understand the laws of brand building and brand growth and can diagnose exactly why it's stuck and it's salient. But it's not a campaign necessarily because it was a television station. It is a television station, but like back then it was the only. So there was no competition. And it delivered to me all of the things that I looked to as a kid for joy, right? Sesame Street was always there. On Sundays, there was like the Bollywood segment. And it was my sort of window into entertainment because this is all pre-cable. And so when I think about storytelling, it wasn't that they were necessarily advertising themselves out of home or on other channels because there were no other channels. But what they did have that I think a lot of brands and people who want to build brands, personal brands, can learn from it is they understood at the time that there was something powerful about the singularity of messaging, look, logo, feel. They had first movers advantage. So they were out there in the market like way before anybody was. And interestingly, when they changed the logo, when was that? A couple of years ago? I feel like there was a Twitter storm about how awful this new logo looked. What they did was not respecting these signals and cues and the emotion that people who are still alive, including myself, had built up for years because of this. And, I think about that a lot. I think about how powerful it is when establishing a brand, and it could be a small shop on a beach or whatever, to be singular in focus, single-minded, and to try and find these ownable elements that like you kind of maintain over time. You might evolve slightly, but like it's like a personality, it's central to you. And I know you didn't ask me this, Kyle, because this is all about memorable campaigns and stories and brands, but just in response to Scott, since we line in and as a conversation, one thing that I wanted to just sort of talk about is the fact that, and I don't know if you've observed this in coaching other execs, but sometimes there are two steps that precede being able to tell your own story and be vulnerable and even say like that woman, I actually don't come across well. It is self-awareness, because a lot of people have no idea, right? Like there's a gap between like the reality and how they're perceiving themselves. So there's like a consciousness that needs to come that is very empowering, because once you know thyself, then everything is free. And then the other thing is a little bit of confidence, because people think that vulnerability is something kind of weak, but it takes a lot of courage and confidence to be vulnerable. So I just wanted to sort of come back to that point. But yeah, Trinidad and Tobago television, totally boring, but talk about salient. Like I could recall the sound of it, the look of that logo that would flash in between, what would happen when the national anthem would start playing at the end of like the broadcast, and then like the lines that would pop up. And, I think the world has changed. The world of television has changed. Of course, it's all great, but there's just a lot to be learned from simpler times too, because people have to really focus on the basics.
Nikki, you take us real down memory lane there, boy. Thank you. I've seen the stripes that come up.
Exactly.
Which means go to bed.
I was always like, oh gosh, there's nothing else to do. I just want to watch more. Oh wait, I have no other TV to watch. It's over.
Yeah. I think what we can learn from what you just described there though is really important. Is something that's nuanced, that it's not like overt in terms of storytelling from the perspective of like, here is a story from start to finish and this is my brand. It's more understanding that storytelling begins with very subtle cues. The things that you said that you remembered had little to do with TTT and their content. TTT is like is a media platform, and so quite frankly, you should have recalled a ton of media content. No, it's not those are the things that you remembered. You remember the visual cues, the sound. You remember these things that are subtle pieces to the brand story that once interwoven well becomes those things that you really remember and really captures you for a long, long, long time.
One quick thing, Kyle. I mean, I think The science of it is that we as human beings are hardwired to make shortcuts. And as we get older, it's even more important that we don't have time. And so you're making quick associations and you have very irrational thought because we're fundamentally irrational beings. And so the job of a brand is to create availability by playing on the neural connections that happen that make behavior root. So basically, the more that you could be, not just to your point, Kyle, like simple, you know, with your heuristics, but to also repeatable, right? You can't change it in a month. You can't come up with a sexy logo and then in a year be like, you have to kind of be consistent, constant, so that you're creating this availability in people's minds so that when they're in context, ready to buy your brand or ready to use your service, it's top of mind. You're not even thinking about it. Just like you don't think about the fact that like, I'm wearing a black shirt right now. Okay.
Yeah. True. Good point. Andre, what was that brand that you remember? So you had some time and I see you had your thinking face on, you know? And so you're probably like juggling through a bunch of brands.
You know, for me, you know, being in the hospitality and tourism sector, it really comes down to me about country brands. And as I think about the Caribbean islands, that so often we think about ourselves as very similar. You know, to really run a tourism campaign, you have to find what's different. And as I think about storytelling, I just think about the Trinidad and Tobago brand. It just comes to mind for me. My childhood, you know, is just, I've always been, you know, talking about Netflix, you know, you look at certain people get a 1 hour comedy special. And I think that I had 1 hour comedy specials around me every single day when I was growing up, right? There was always somebody who was a storyteller who just had the line rolling. And we get used to that, and you kind of forget as a Trinidadian who's lived out of Trinidadian for 20 years, the way we speak in hyperbole, right? So that it, to every other person in the room, it sounds like that man a real lion boy. But the other Trinidadians know that he's just telling a story. And what that jumped to mind for me is a friend of mine, he was describing an accident he had. He said he was driving down the road and it was pouring with rain, right? And he said all of a sudden, he see a family of donkeys crossing the road. So he jammed on the brakes. He said the car skid left, it skid right, it make about 4 circles, it spin. He said he hit the mother donkey, it fly up in the air, land, went through the windscreen, and when he look across, you know, he see a donkey sitting down in the car next to him, right? And everybody like, what? And the other Trinis were like laughing, while the other Caribbean nationals were like, really, that happened? He said, of course, no, that didn't happen. I just basically bounced the donkey and put a little dent in the front of my car, right? But that doesn't make for a good story. And to an outsider, it could be that man could real life boy, right? But to a Trini, hearing stories told like that, you forget how powerful it is until you live outside of Trinidad for a while. And when I have a Trinidadian crew, Scott was over in Barbados, you know, about 2 weeks ago with some of his friends to celebrate a birthday. And the kind of stories that were going by there, you know, it was a comedy show, right? And I haven't been that entertained by a bunch of people sitting down. These are all career professionals, CEOs, business leaders, just being able to sit down and put things in context in a way that really creates a sort of a social connection that is so unique to Trinidad that I appreciate so much being a Trinidadian who doesn't live there. So for me, when it comes down to a brand, I can't think, and maybe it happens in Latin countries, you know, that I don't speak the language well enough to understand the nuance of it. But for me, in the English-speaking countries that I've visited in my life, there's no brand that I connect with storytelling like Trinidadian culture. And it's just growing up with it. It's become such a part of my life. And then being removed from it, I appreciate it so much more right now. Right. So that's really where that was really what was going through my head when I started thinking about a brand on storytelling. Now, is that a sellable brand to the world? You know, can you define a tourism product around storytelling? I don't know. Right. But it seems to me that Trinidad is ripe for filmmaking, for poetry, for writing, and all of those creative vehicles for where the future is going to go. All right, the future is going to go where AI will take, you know, a lot of automated acts, but this ability to construct a story, you know, will still remain the realm of humans for a while, and it really is something that Trinidadians do I think, exceptionally well. Right? So, so Scott, that was a good line about 2 weeks ago, boy. That's some real good talk. Right?
Oh my God, can I please be invited to the next Bayesian line? Barbadian.
Nice. You're in, man. You're in.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you just recreated that, and I just started to laugh on some of the things I wish I could share on this thing, but we cannot. But it's just really, really hilarious.
But we lime in, we drink in. There's a big boy lime, you know, there's a adults lime. You know?
Listen, mind you, there's a 14-year-old watching the stream.
Yeah.
No, but there's a last thing I want to say about storytelling, and it's almost something I want to say about creativity as well. That so many people say, I am not a good storyteller, or I am not creative. So they really just need a little help and a little structure, because fundamentally, I mean, there's so many numbers, you know, that have been tossed around for how more powerful putting things in a story are than if you just give facts, right? So 22 times as much recall, I think, is as good as 7 times. So 7 times better recall if you put something in a story form than if you just give somebody facts, right? And a simple example for me, I remember I was trying to think of 3 ways that companies could be innovative, right? Which would be value extraction, value capture, value, being able to create value. And for me to remember that, the extraction, I think of myself in a dentist's office, you know, waiting to get a tooth extracted. So I remember by making that connection between extraction and the first part of that story in my head. And in that story, the dentist's light is too bright, and I'm wearing a cap, and I pull it down over my eyes. So I think of capture. So extraction goes to capture, and then automatically creative comes in. And if I have to ever remember those 3 things around how you could create value through innovation in an organization, 20 years from now, that story would have disappeared, but it's what I use in my brain to be able to almost use as a file folder to find how things are related. Yeah. And the more we could find these sort of relationships between facts and string it together in a way that makes sense, it is better we have a deeper understanding, ability to communicate it, and ability to actually share ideas. Right. So that's what really jumps to mind for me in terms of how storytelling becomes a very, very powerful tool that anybody can use.
Can I just build on that with respect? And given that we had a kind of a Trinidad theme, TTT Trinidad, I'm going to share a story. Ads, really good ads can tell a story in 30 seconds, 15 seconds, right? And again, talking about dating yourself, this ad has to be 40 years old, right? But it's an ad on Cricks, Bermuda's Cricks, right? And the ad is a guy is going to the airport, and the customs officer stops him with his bag, and he has this big old-time grip, right? And when he opens the suitcase, you see cricks everywhere, cricks, all kind of cricks, right? You say, Mike, where are you going? You say, well, this is my vital supplies. And then he pulls up a little small brown bag, and he says, what's in that bag? And he says, my clothes, right? And this idea of cricks being your vital supplies, right? Every time I go to the grocery, going for my dad or whatever, and you pass near the Cricks aisle, you can't help but say, but if you run to groceries, boy, at least a bag of Cricks will save you to some extent. Cricks and some cheese or whatever, right? But this idea of planting that vital supply kind of concept has stuck with me all these years, right? So I don't know whether that was just a genius of that thinking, but really that story, instead of having something vital and essential in your house, I think every Trinidad household, to some extent, has some Cricks somewhere in the cupboard, right? So anyway, that's what my branding had me think of when you were thinking about brands from that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree wholeheartedly. Cricks has then become a vital staple in every Trini household, and that really was done by interweaving that story of Cricks being your vital supplies, which I think they did a phenomenal job. Whatever agency came up with it, kudos to them. If the listeners know what agency it is, big them up, full 100 on that. So tonight we have a few giveaways happening, right? And so to the listeners that have been paying attention, I didn't mention the giveaways before because, I didn't really want to sell out so that you're paying extra attention. But I have a simple question. I have a very simple question. With the exception of the last brand that we spoke about being Cricks, We've discussed several brands which resonated with each of us. Tell us 2 brands, except Cricks, that were highlighted in this discussion. And by the end of tonight, you'll have the opportunity to win. And so I want you to go to Tech Beach's Instagram page, drop us a DM, let us know. All right. Make sure you're following us too. If you're not following us and then you win, I mean, you get the right answer. Can't really promise you that you'll win, but you're selected at random. But if you're not following, you might select somebody else. I'm not saying that we will, but I'm saying that we might. Anyways, so yeah, continuing on with the discussion. All right. So I think in the discussion we're having here, we identify quite a number of things that stand out to us that really help us to remember brands, feel enamored by the story that they're trying to tell. But Andre, given your history and experience, help us structure this a bit. Right before wait, let me finish now. You're ready. This man ready to jump on there.
No, I ready.
I don't give him a preamble,
I still have a little stuff I could do while you're talking. Go ahead.
I said Trini and me and Dr. Oli come from the same cloth. We gotta give a nice preamble. All right, so Andre, in my preamble, come tell us a bit about the structure of how we should think about these stories as an SME, as a small business. We don't have all the resources, and so we don't have a big brand budget to hire agency and a thing. Tell us, in essence, how do we begin thinking and structuring our thoughts around weaving a story that can really resonate with our initial first customers, that first tribe that love our product?
Yeah, and let me jump in with a post-amble, right? If that's a thing. Right? And to do that, I want to go back to your original. So one of the questions you asked earlier about Crocs, right? And I know we've been dating ourselves on this call, but I'm gonna date myself back to when the Soca Warriors were in the World Cup, and I had a pair of black Crocs that I wore back in whenever that was, and it was not stylish at the time, right? It definitely wasn't stylish. And now, I mentioned that I have a beach bar here in Barbados, and I look at all the guys who work behind the bar, and they all wear Crocs, right? And the thing about Crocs that's different today than it was then is what you call gibbets, all right? And when you look at these gibbets, what is it? Crocs had these holes that were really designed for ventilation. And somebody, I don't know who it is, it could be the chief innovation officer, it could just be somebody working in the factory side, but we're wasting time with these holes. Let us design something to make these holes useful. And I don't know what you call it, but it used to be a bracelet. Was it a Pandora where you bought different charms, right? And part of that bracelet was that you got to customize and build your own story that was represented on your wrist. So that when somebody looked at your wrist and they looked at all the charms that you chose, if you had done a Find Your Music program with Scott and you recognize that you like ballet, you would find a ballet dancer, you would find music, you would find dancing shoes, and you could tell your story in 1 second by how you basically built out the little charms that went on your bracelet. Similarly with Crocs, what I realized is the guys behind the bar, they try to tell a story about themselves using the little gibbets that they actually attach to their Crocs, right? So Crocs have actually gone from being an ugly, comfortable shoe to being a blank palette on which users can tell their own story. And fundamentally, as we look at SMEs trying to build out what is a network effect, really, if you're trying to build a new app that requires a community of users, WhatsApp makes no sense if you only have 2 people on WhatsApp, right? I love BlackBerry Messenger. Again, that was my favorite. And I said I will never give up my BlackBerry because I love my physical keyboard. But very soon, I was the only person with a BlackBerry, and therefore there was no network of people for me to communicate with. So as a small brand, you have to build out these networks. And one of the key things with those networks is to identify very early on with your product who are going to be your most loyal users. And you know, there's this rule called the rule of 1,000 fans, right? If you have 1,000 fans who prepare to pay you $100 a year for access to your product, you're making $100,000 US, right? And that's really $8 something a month. So how can you build that initial fan base, which could be your friends and family only, to build these small networks that expand exponentially and organically off of those original users? And those initial users, you have to give them a tool to be able to tell other people. Because if somebody asks you about your product, you know all about the product. But if somebody asks one of your early users about the product, what they're going to say, right? So you almost have to craft that story for them. And one of the pieces of structure that we like to use, Scott and I use it all the time in corporate storytelling, is called the principle of share. And that share principle has actually come out of the HR sector, where if you're doing an interview and somebody says, tell me about yourself, one of the ways you do that is you say, well, here was the situation, S. So we're going to look at our share acronym. What was the situation? Every good story has a villain, right? So what was the hindrance? What was the problem? What was the challenge you had to overcome? So let me give you the background. Let me give you the villain, the challenge, the thing I needed, the obstacle. Here was the action I took to overcome that obstacle. What was the result? And what's the experience I can take forward, right? So that whenever you want to tell a story about anything, you can actually, if you remember that share principle and think about it as sharing a story, you can very quickly say, what was the situation? What was the hindrance? What was the action? What was the result? What was the experience that you should get out of this? But when it comes down to your product and being able to build that as an SME, building an audience for yourself or building a network of users, fundamentally, you should start by seeding, you know, a bunch of people who are going to be your loyal fans in the beginning, and then help them to tell your story in a way that is memorable in your absence. You know, I think Bezos is the one who said that your brand is really what people say about you when you're not in the room. And ultimately, if you can help people to say the right, because if I were to talk about Scott, you know, there's so many things I could say about Scott. Scott would have to help me to understand what is the thing that he wants me to say, because I have a lot of good things to say, but that can end up being jumbled. So I often ask Scott, what are you the master at? That if I were to say, this is what Scott is the best in the world at, I have it at the tip of my tongue. And Scott has said, I am a greatness detective, right? And I love that, because he is, right? And I could say that to people, and then they build their own understanding. But within that simple sentence, I can tell Scott's story better than if I didn't have that simple little piece of information from Scott to help me along the way, right? So I think I went on for a little while there, but clearly it is what it is basically find your initial fans, which will early on will be friends and family. Let them know what your story is and make it easy for them to share that story with other people, right? So those are the 3 steps that I would really say for anybody who's starting a new business and trying to build out a loyal set of followers.
Yeah, good. Anyone have anything to add to that? Scott or Nakia? Well, Scott, you're on mute.
Oh, you're still on mute, boy.
But
I think to add to that is brilliant. I mean, I think, I think in terms of the corporate, the share acronym is simple. It works, right? And it's amazing how many people, when asked that question in an interview, even in an interview setting, tell me about yourself or tell me something, it's just really flat. And when, you know, what I love about this idea is when you bring in that challenge or that opportunity, the challenge or the barrier is perk up, because everybody can relate to a challenge in their particular life that they've overcome, right? That's where the juice is. And it gets into what Nakia was saying earlier, that we don't want to be vulnerable to talk about challenges if we want to think, but that's what really makes a difference and really get people's interest, you know. The thing I will say too is one of the things that courses that Andrea and I deliver together on presentations, Andrea always talks about who's the enemy in the room, right? And the enemy for anybody presenting, everybody tries to guess what it is, and then he shows your smartphone, right? And the truth of the matter is, if you are not interesting within a few minutes, people go to their phone, right? So you have to actually be more interesting, than somebody's smartphone. And therefore the bar, and there's a lot of great stuff on people's smartphones, right? So you really have to take storytelling to a whole different level, at an emotional level, to keep people very engaged. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
The only thing I would add, and I loved the framework that you shared, Andre. So this is not based on me I started initiatives, but this is based on like market entry strategies with global corporations. One thing that I think complements this view, which you just shared, the 3 steps, and like making it easy for friends and family to tell you a story, that I think is additive, is applying the jobs to be done theory, which basically says, look, you may think that the baby that you've birthed in the form of this new idea is the best thing ever. And you want everybody to know about it who is close to you. But in real life, the people who you have to convince don't care. They don't know you. There is no awareness of who you are, what your brand is offering. And so one of the things that I think has been really helpful, even as big mega brands consider market entry strategies into places where, for example, at Colgate, we were trying to enter sub-Saharan Africa and parts of rural India where people don't use toothpaste and toothbrush. So it wasn't like necessarily that you didn't have anything to rely on. You had to literally convert people. We apply this theory of jobs to be done, which basically asks the question, when people need something, I'm bored, I'm hungry, I feel tipsy or whatever, you hire goods and services to fill that job. And you fire a bunch of others. And I think what it does in asking that question is to sharpen your focus on what that special message is that you would deliver to friends and family. Because I think ultimately when they're telling other people, like, you should try this, the other people are going to trust them. I think trust goes a long way. And I tend to, take the information of the tanties on WhatsApp when it comes to COVID. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'm not going to talk about WhatsApp and like what's happening there, but you tend to trust family and friends more than anything else. And so if they're going to represent you, you need to make sure that the story that they're telling isn't just what you want them to say, but depositions competitors effectively by saying, look, when you are, let's say it's an entertainment service, when you are bored, you hire a number of things. You go for a walk, you flip through your phone, you have to articulate why they must fire those other solutions that they've gone to forever and hire your solution. And crystallizing that, I think, in complement to the 3 steps, is magical. And I think a lot of people get it wrong and end up telling a story that other people are telling. So people are like, I'm not going to switch what I'm doing to adopt your new thing that you think is great.
Yeah. Good. That's a solid example from Colgate and the approach that we've taken. I underscore that approach entirely. I've just heard from my control room that we have our first winner. So we have our first winner as we transition to the final segment of our conversation today. The winner is, her name is Tiana Joseph from Trinidad and Tobago. Let's give a round of applause to Tiana. All right. There are other opportunities to win prizes. I didn't tell you all what the prize was. Or they just hear free thing and all they want to just enter one time. That's so trendy. Don't even know all they're winning. I didn't say all they're winning. All they're just ready. Whether it is I want it. Well, in the spirit of still giving free thing, but not telling all what it is, it's our next chance to win something that you don't know what it is. Well, let me tell you what the question is, all right? This question is a little harder than the other question. Eh? So we've had a lot of discussion tonight, and you really had to be paying attention in order to win this free prize that you don't know what it is. All right? You had to be really paying attention. All right. And so we've spoken about key strategies to build your brand story. And each of us commented, Andre went on a whole nice story. He gave like acronym and all kind of thing, and we went with Colgate, with Nakia. So tell me a couple of these strategies. I need at least 2 strategies, that we really dug into You know, it's like a pop quiz in school. Only paying attention, you're not paying attention. All right, only passing the test if you know if you're giving the right answers. So tell me two of the strategies that we just discussed that will really help you build out your brand story, and really build that sort of resonance we're looking for. Anyways, once again, follow us, drop it in the DMs, and I'll let you know within the next few minutes. Not too long, yeah, 8 minutes to go. Yeah, who win? So rolling on the discussion, yeah. Here where we going. So we understand a bit of how we structure our brands. We take a look at some of the brands that we love, and the brands that really resonated with us. We identified what we love from the notes, the look, the feel, the story, the ad, you know. But what I get that is really important as well, is that I don't know that we necessarily mentioned in this way, is a sense of authenticity. All right, and a sense of authenticity about who this brand is, who they are, and what is real to them. And brands these days, man, we live in a social media time and era where if you're fake, like, they're gonna find out. And they're not just only going to find out, they're going to blast you to the moon. All right, they're going to blast you to the moon. And so it's really important that when you're building this brand and you're telling the story is authentic. And it's not a problem if you're telling a fairy tale, you know, because brands build themselves around telling really fantasy stories, you know. But it's a problem if you're not being true to who you are, you know, and you let's say you pride yourself around being a green, clean company, and you're doing shit. I can say that on this thing. Oh yeah, we drink it. Yeah. And not to necessarily end it off on a bad note, but it's good to balance the equation a little bit. What brands come to all your mind that really wasn't authentic, and you get catch, you know, you thought you're digging a little bit, and you get enamored by it, and then you get catch. You find yourself get catch. And we have to tell this really quickly, but I think it's important to kind of balance the scale so people don't get carried away with going in one direction and feeling that they could just hoodwink, you know. And of course, look, Andrew ready, watch him. He does, see, he only go. Andrew only go, watch him.
Go, my gospel.
All right. So who wants to go first? What brand comes to all your mind? And we have to be shorter this time, tighter, because we wanna end on the dot at 8 o'clock. Well, 7 Eastern, you know. All right. Anybody hand first? Well, I go choose. Scott, you can go ahead.
Sorry, what this brings up for me is this idea of perception versus reality, right? But it was a time when I used to love Tommy Hilfiger.
Cool.
And then
I see you going already. Me too.
Right. And then it was, you know, alleged his comments, and this is back in the days before we even have this level of awareness, etc. But you know, Patty made some racist comments, but just the perception of that, you know, was a major turn off for me. So that's kind of what popped into my brain. There's some local examples here in Trinidad, but I think I prefer not to
put nobody on blast.
Not to go there, but with the same Black Lives Matter movement thing, you know, a couple people made some missteps on social media, and it was they felt the consequence of it. So you're absolutely right. You know, that there's some nowadays it's a different ball game, and I think a lot of and you talked about the whole green environmental thing. A lot of boards in Trinidad now have to kind of look at a number of things that very carefully. Equality of pay with women, the environmental stuff, a lot of stuff now is going to come down that they're going to have to kind of deal with. So interesting from that standpoint. For once, the values that above the receptionist that nobody pays attention to, those same values, all of a sudden they have to now deal with those values in a very different way. Yeah. So that's what came to mind as you spoke. Yeah.
Maybe I'll piggyback off of it only because similarly, I thought about not one particular brand, but the industry of beauty in America. And this is sort of a fallout from George Floyd's murder in the US and the Black Lives Matter movement. There was a lot of momentum to see companies make meaningful changes, and brands in particular, to everything from their boards to executive leadership to like the representation on shelf. And there was this hashtag Blackout Tuesday where everybody was supposed to put a black square across social media. And it was a moment of solidarity, but I think people were like, this is very weird, Estee Lauder. This is very weird, Target. Like let's look at your boards. Let's also look at your executive representation. This seems very strange. And oh, by the way, let's look at your shelves. Like you're supporting with a black square, but 2% of the products on your beauty shelf are actually like, from Black people and by Black people. Sorry, and it led to the formation of the 15% pledge, a group of women who were like, look, we want to see at least 15% of your beauty shelves represented by products from the community. But yeah, it was not a good look. It was a time of a lot of performative allyship where people were like, look, we stand, but like not really. And I think social media it does a couple of things, or the internet does a couple of things. It allows you to go deep and explore and rabbit hole and find the truth and then put people on blast. So beware.
Yeah. Well, what's here? We finishing with Andrew.
No, and for me, I don't know if any of you, I mentioned F1 a little early on, when we were talking, and I have to tell you that I look at F1 racing, which I follow, and I wonder why Red Bull is involved, right? So Red Bull is involved in F1 racing. When you look at the other companies involved, is Mercedes, Ferrari, Alfa Romeo. Yeah, you have all these different, and then you have Red Bull, and you ask yourself, why is a drink company involved in F1 racing when they don't manufacture cars? And I was so upset by how the race ended on Sunday with Red Bull winning that I just went to the bar on Monday and I banned Red Bull from the bar. We say we're not serving any Red Bull here, right? Oh well, no, just kidding. Well, kind of not kidding, but ultimately, what I say is that when you're a brand and you actually put yourself out there, and you take yourself, in a space, there's some interesting brands, especially in the F&B business, food and beverage business, that attach. So Red Bull attaches themselves to real excitement. But there's a fast-growing water. We don't have it in the Caribbean. I don't know if you're familiar. It's called Liquid Death. Have you ever heard of it? Liquid Death. So I just want to look very quickly. Liquid Death is just water, and it's in a beer can, right? And they have done a lot of really strange things with their brand, where they're all around. It's like a Red Bull type campaign. Liquid Death. All right, there you go. So it's just water in a can. And I'm now looking at them on Instagram. They have about 670,000 followers. They're one of the fastest growing water brands. And when I look at some of the things they did, so they're all into action, extreme sports. And they did a skateboard with Tony Hawk's blood in it. So they took Tony Hawk's blood and they put it in a red paint, and they painted a certain number of skateboards with it, and they distributed that. And for me, there's certain times when a brand goes too far, all right, because it starts to feel like you're pushing the thing just for controversy. And I get turned off of brands like that. If you wanna take ordinary water and put it in a can and build a campaign and a brand off of it, that's fine. But when you go to the point where it's forced and you're taking blood and putting it in paint, just to almost be extreme, I kind of get turned off of brands on that, and I can't see myself drinking any Liquid Death. I can't get into it. I'll just take some tap water, please. Thank you very much, with two blocks of ice. Right? I'm not gonna build into the brand world, which doesn't feel authentic to me, about taking water and trying to make a story around water that feels so far removed from the product. Yeah.
But clearly, back to your point, they're one of the fastest growing brands. Clearly, it resonates with a specific audience.
It does.
and and they are playing the game where they're on either you love us or you hate us,
And they're
either
quite
way,
happy to have people like me say what I say. Yeah.
right, and either way, whether you love us or you hate us, you're gonna feel something. All right. And so many brands fall in that mushy middle where you're indifferent. You don't care. You interact with the brand and they're absolutely not memorable. And so I think it's real clear what their strategy is. Their strategy is whether you love us or you hate us, you will remember us. All right. And so that in itself is a strategy. All right. And it's quite clearly an effective one. All right. So they left a mark on you and the mark was a negative one. They win still, a check in their box. All right. Yeah. And so I think we looked at brands from a number of different perspectives tonight. We looked at telling stories from a number of different perspectives. We looked at the good, closed off with the bad, and we looked at how we structure things. And I think this conversation can go on and on. But with these sort of panel discussions, a little lime, like I say, we're drinking a little bit. I just finished my wine, it's right in time. We can only touch on so much. We can only vibes a little bit, give them a taste of where our minds are at and how do we think about things. And so I want to close on a positive note by awarding another winner. All right. Actually, my control room is telling me there are two winners for this last question. First winner, was that control? Yeah. First winner, Desiree Felix. Desiree Felix, come on down. No, I'm kidding. Desiree Felix is first next winner. Round of applause, Desiree. Good job on answering, good job on following, good job on sliding in our DMs. And the second winner is Miss Shade Seeley. All right. Shade, round of applause. Good job. Good job on paying attention. Clearly, you were an A student in school, you know to answer the questions very well. So tonight we close off. We want to give thanks to all of you for contributing, taking of your time. I know all of you are very busy people, and I take not for granted you all making time to be here to share in the discussion, to lime a little bit, to drink a little wine, and talk about brands and delving into storytelling and that sort of thing. And so thank you very much, Scott, Nakia, Andre, and without further ado, I would like to close and tell you all good night, bid you all farewell, adios, ciao. Actually, until next year. Wow. And so this brings the end to the Nudge TBR series for 2021. Wow. I'd like to thank all involved. I'd like to thank Kinesis Studios. I'd like to thank my team, Raquel, Gia, who's on social media. I'd like to thank Mari on the Nudge team and all the Nudge people that have brought things together for the last few weeks. We 110% couldn't do it without any of you coming together to make this happen. And I think we've put together a really quality production that lay groundwork for 2022. And we are super excited for what is to come and bringing together more conversations like this that are super meaningful and powerful and growing our communities together. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year, and see you all in 2022. Boom.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.